As we've heard tonight, there's so much need in our community to have more spaces for our benefit. Art spaces, affordable housing, grocery stores, farmland, all of these things need to come together to make us a true and prosperous local community. And we're here because often it's the financing, the money that gets in the way of bringing these things to life. My name is Collins-Swartz. I work with a small nonprofit called Tapestry Community Capital, and we work with other nonprofits, co-ops, and charities to use the power of their communities, their local ties, to finance these projects with community bonds. So what are community bonds? We've heard from Steve, who's talked about community bonds with the Mount. Essentially, it's a really powerful way of going out into your local community and getting people to invest in meaningful capital projects like land or building or equipment to help bring them to life. Essentially, people in the community all coming together to lend you money at an affordable interest rate, and they're getting a bit of a financial return. The bond is issued in the name of the organization. So as Steve said, it was going to be a Mount bond. And thinking about that, for any other project in the community, first and foremost, it's the name of your organization or your project, standing up tall saying, this is our bond, this is what we're looking to finance, and rallying other people in the community to help bring that to life. People who share similar values and have a similar shared interest in bringing whatever you want to life. Interest rates on community bonds range from about 3 to 6% that we've seen, and it is a loan. It's an interest-bearing loan that you have to repay. So thinking about how your organization will have the cash flow or the revenue in the future to repay these investors. So it's different than traditional granting or donations. It can be used in combination, but there are a lot of advantages to what make community bonds unique, and from my perspective, really a tool for the future. Community bonds are also a little bit different than a typical bond. That is because they have the word community in front of them. So in the community bonds that we support for other nonprofits, there isn't just one bond offering. So for example, let's say I'm financing a new affordable housing development in Peterborough, and I'm going to need about $4 million in funding. Typically, you're not just going to community bonds to get all of the financing. It can range from anywhere between, let's say, 10 and 50% of the money that you're looking for. And as Steve mentioned, there are many other sources of financing that they went to, from local government to credit unions being involved that help bring it to life. But we might say, okay, let's raise $1 million. We want $1 million of that $4 million to come from the community. We could think about, let's say, having an $1,000 bond at 3%, and then let's say a $5,000 bond at 5%, each being repaid within 7 years. By structuring it this way, you're making the investment accessible to many different types of people in the community so they can invest in the project. So we're not just thinking this as an investment product for accredited investors or people who have a lot of disposable income to invest. You can price it low enough and at an accessible rate to bring everyone into your project as investors. So look, other than the money, what's sort of the why behind community bonds and some more of their benefits? We can see, walking around Peterborough, there are lots of signs that say locally owned restaurant, or there's been a huge rise in eating local produce or supporting local business, something that a community does really well. Well, let's start to think about how we can also invest within that same mindset, that we're keeping money within the Peterborough community. Money stays within Peterborough as much as it can, from money earned, where you spend it, but also where you invest it. And although community bond holders, people who invest in the projects, earn a rate of return, it's not just the money. There's a great sense of pride and a sense of ownership almost that people get once they've actually invested money in your project. And I'm sure maybe, again, to point it to Steve, but he could tell stories of investors who come to the Mount and they're proud to have invested because they can walk actually people around through the space. And anytime someone walks or drives through the community with their family, they can point to it and say, hey, we built that. We made that happen. That's really the power of the community bond. And in a way, there are other things that always come from community bonds, like a lot of public support, media gets involved, it's a way of going into the community. It's important to note as well that as a nonprofit, all the bonds that Tapestry has supported with other nonprofits around Ontario, they've all been oversubscribed. So there's been more demand from investors, people wanting to make these types of investments, than there have been availability for people to take on these funds. So as organizations, if you can start to think in the long term about what some of these iconic, meaningful dream projects might be that would inspire communities to invest, what might be some revenue sources, some ways that we can earn some cash flow in the future to repay investors? And then finally, who might some community members be that we could go to and look towards to raise investment and raise support for our project? A little bit more about who I am and who we are. We started from the Toronto Renewable Energy Co-op, which was basically a bunch of long-haired co-op people who got together in the late 90s when I was still in elementary school and said, we need more renewable energy in our community, but how are we going to finance it? All the renewable energy is being built by big corporate groups. Let's have more community-owned energy. So they started raising bonds and starting their own wind and solar co-ops. As we were doing that, we started to have more groups come to us that weren't developing renewable energy, but they were developing housing or co-working spaces. And we started teaching them the different secrets we knew about how to raise these bonds. In May, after a lot of different conversations in the community, we launched Tapestry Community Capital, which is a nonprofit specifically dedicated to helping other nonprofits, charities, and co-ops raise and manage community bonds. It's a lot of fun. So to date, as Trek and as Tapestry, there have been other groups, not just the Mount, who've come before with community bonds. With Tapestry and Trek, we've supported about $60 million in investment being raised in Ontario for these projects. And that's come from 4,500 people. So these are both impressive, but also aspirational numbers. Like, that's really amazing. It's traction. But to think about all the economic activity in a community, all the other worthy projects and needs that need to be developed, we can think about what might come in the future. So as I mentioned, some things to think about when you're thinking, okay, community bond, is this right for me? What do I have to think about? What are sort of the factors to get my head around? Starting first is thinking about, what's your project? Is it meaningful? Is it needed by the community? Is it going to get people excited to invest? And then secondly, thinking about your community of supporters. Who will you look to for investment? And then lastly, as I mentioned, the revenue stream. Community bond project, we can talk more together after, but I would say it takes about 8 months to 12 months to get together and to complete a project. You're going to have 4 phases to any community bond project. You have your assessment, your structuring the funds, the raising the funds, and then the managing the funds. So it's important to spend a little bit of time up front assessing if community bonds are right for your project, if you have the money to pay back investors, if people in the community are interested in investing. So being able to go to people and say, hey, we don't have a community bond right now, but we're thinking of doing this. Would you be interested in investing if we did have a bond? A lot of that early testing is really important. And then the structuring, as Steve mentioned, is all the different legal documents and preparing for a raise, and then actually going out and raising the funds, which is really exciting. It's a chance to go out in your community, engage people, events, conversations, bring people along with your project. And after you've raised your funds, you do have a little bit of the management. So all of a sudden, you've had this affordable housing development funded, but now I have 300 investors. And all of them, there's 2 different bond types, and they each have to be given their interest payments and be given their tax forms. That's something that we saw as a really important need as Trek started raising our community bonds. So we've developed our own in-house software and systems that we provide to other nonprofits so they can manage community bonds, and it's not a huge pain in the rear end. It's done simply and it's done professionally, so investing in a community bond feels exactly like investing in another type of investment. What I love most about community bonds and even this gathering tonight is with the power of community, we're able to take something like financing and actually turn it on its head. And with the power of community, financing can actually be used as a catalyst and an advantage for a lot of the projects that we have. So I'd encourage you to think a little bit bigger tonight as a group, have that vision, and come talk to me about community bonds. Thank you.